Hello, hello. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'll just say a few words before we start, and we've only got an hour, so quite keen to get cracking with the discussion. My name's Adam Webb. The idea for this panel actually sort of revolves around some conversations and work that I've been involved with around reform of the secondary ticketing market with the FanFair Alliance. Which is an area we've seen a lot of progress in the UK, to the point now where if an artist, a manager, an agent, promoter doesn't want to see their fans exploited on a site like Viagogo, then they can choose to do something about it. And we've seen a big sea change in that area. Obviously, since mid-March, secondary ticketing as an issue is now some way down the pecking order. Obviously, we're in a recession right now, a pandemic, live music shut down. There's absolutely serious issues in play, survival, livelihoods, supporting businesses that are under threat, building a pathway back to full capacity, innovation, safety. Obviously, in the UK alone, hundreds of thousands of jobs on the line. But saying that when live music does come back, think that there's an importance that we don't row back on that progress. And although there'll be a lot of commercial pressures, it's really important that we, continue on some of these issues. And clearly, live music has been at the forefront of a lot of advocacy work, campaigning, whether that's gender diversity, accessibility for deaf and disabled people, the environment, mental health, or providing a career path for young people. Lots of brilliant work going on pre-COVID, lots of massive achievements, and obviously a need for that to continue when live music returns. So that's really what we want to focus on for the next hour. Got 5 absolutely brilliant people on the panel, all of whom are experts in their field. So first of all, just want to say thank you for IQ for the opportunity to hold the discussion. Thanks for Francine, Jakob, Natalie, Paul and Sital for giving us an hour of their time. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. We can take questions from the viewers, or I can take questions from the viewers as we go along. So please do contribute to the chat. But first of all, I'd just like everyone here just to, in turn, just tell us a bit about who you are and what you do. So we'll start in alphabetical order. So kick off with Francine.
Thanks, Adam. I'm Francine. I am the pledge coordinator for the KeyChange project. KeyChange is a gender equality project led by Reeperbahn Festival, PRS Foundation and Music Centrum Oost, supported by Creative Europe, and it comprises of 2 major strands. So the first one is a talent development program, where each year of the project we have around 74 women or gender minority musicians and innovators, so music industry members, get together. They form a network for a year and they take part in creative labs and find ways of working together to strengthen the position of women in the music industry. And the second part of the project is the part that I work on very closely, and that is the pledge, which is where we get music organizations and festivals around the world to commit to at least 50% women and gender minority representation within their festival lineups, within their staff, their boards, their technical teams, and so on.
Great, thank you very much. Jakob, you can come next.
Hi, this is Jacob. I'm the founder of the Green Music Initiative, which is a pan-European research agency for the music and entertainment sector. We work as innovation and research body for festivals, for events, for venues, and most of you are based in the UK, so we are kind of the continental version of Julie's Bicycle. In the past 12 years, we worked with different actors like big festivals or the Eurovision Song Contest, and in the fields of innovation, sustainability, energy efficiency, mental health. And whenever there's a challenge to be tackled, the Green Music Initiative hopefully can help. We are more of an action network, so we do research, but most of the times we're trying to put these understandings into real activities. Our most actual activity is the Everywhere Hydrogen project. This is a project in which we developed with a network of 15 European partners hydrogen fuel cells for festivals, making our dream come true to power a festival on renewable resources without any emissions.
Great, thank you very much. Natalie.
Hi there, I'm Natalie from Small Green Shoots. It's great to join you guys. I am the founder CEO of Small Green Shoots. We support young people from low-income backgrounds getting jobs, experiences and opportunities in the music industry. We do that for a range of ways. About 80% of our cohort are Black, minority, ethnic. And we just think it's really, really important to be pushing the diversity agenda in the music industry at this time, even though we've been doing this for the last 10 years. We also champion diverse, low-income and BME projects for funding in the music and entertainment industry. So helping them with fundraising, helping them with project management, project development, to make sure that funding is also representative and meeting its diversity aims also. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. And I didn't just dress in green so that I'd remember where I work. I just noticed that, so I'm really sorry about that. It's purely coincidence.
I did wonder who'd be taking care with their background. Going there, so that's good. Paul, you're up next. Give us a bit of background on yourself and what Attitudes Everything does.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Paul Hawkins. I am the head of volunteering and skills development for Attitudes Everything. Attitudes Everything are a charity that works to improve access to live music for deaf and disabled people. We've been working since 2000 with venues and festivals to improve access for audiences, and have a charter of best practice which is based around working with mystery shoppers to identify the barriers which deaf and disabled people face when accessing venues and festivals, and then also working with festivals and venues to find practical solutions to those barriers, which we've then turned into an overall kind of document, a kind of handbook to be accessible, which we call the Charter of Best Practice. Over the last 3 years, we've expanded what we do. So we started the Next Stage initiative, which worked around improving opportunities for deaf and disabled artists to get into the music industry. And this week, we've launched a project which I'm heading, which is called the Beyond the Music initiative. And this is about looking at people working right across the industry and how we can make the industry more accessible for deaf and disabled people to work in and volunteer in, and also how we can support deaf and disabled people who want to work and volunteer in the industry to get those opportunities. We also do some research and campaigns and lobbying work, and we've been involved in some of the discussions around reopening with the DCMS, but I think we'll probably talk about that during the course of the discussion.
We will. We'll dive into all of that, and particularly Beyond the Music, because I know that that launched this week. Sital, let's hear from you as well about you, the work that you do.
Brilliant. So hi everyone, I'm Sital Panesar, and I am a counsellor and psychotherapist, but I'm also founder of MusicaTherapy. So that's an organisation aimed to support musicians of colour, basically, and those in the music industry with their emotional and mental health and well-being. Alongside that, we also aim to improve awareness and provide seminars and training surrounding mental health in the industry. And it's all music industry specific, given that musicians are 3 times more likely to develop mental health issues. So it's really important to keep that support system going and raising awareness in that. I'm also a member of the Music Industry Therapists and Coaches, and through that we're launching a book next year called the Touring and Mental Health Manual, which is sponsored by Live Nation. So that's going to be kind of like a one-stop shop for everything and anything that a musician or those in the music industry might need to know or might want to know about supporting themselves and their health as a whole. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Oh, Jacob is. Oh, you okay? He's okay, I think. Okay.
No, I'm just showing support.
Oh, okay, great.
I muted myself saying hello.
Sorry, I've got everyone in very small actually, so because I've got my notes here as well. All good. Before we sort of get with the here and now, I thought it'd be interesting just to hear from everyone, just to sort of rewind back to the start of the year, so pre-pandemic. Just to hear about what you were all doing before lockdown. What in your work had the biggest impact in 2019, and what I suspect before all your plans got ripped off and you've sort of had to do other things, but what were you most looking forward to in 2020? Nat. start with you. We've had some quite, just as preparation for this panel, just actually talking about the impact of coronavirus on young people, the shift to home working, and really, just really the impact on sort of low income households and that sort of entry into the, into the music industry. Just be interested to hear, just again, what the kind of stuff you were working on, what you had planned.
You threw me there, Adam. You absolutely threw me, because I was thinking 2019. Like, when was that? Like, what was I doing? Like, I know I certainly didn't have all these lines. It just seems like such a long time ago now, doesn't it? Things were very different. I mean, we had the biggest problem that we have as a small functioning charity is space. I need space to train young people for these specialist skills that are used for the creative industries, and make sure that they have somewhere safe and professional to work. And we had just got some a big charitable donation from lovely Simon Moran. I've got to give him a shout out because he really helped us out. And Tile Yard as well had come in and matched that funding so that we could have an office for the delivery for the shoots to work in. So we were literally just organising a new space for them to work, and we had been fundraising to get another youth manager, and things were really coming together, and we recruited a whole bunch of new young people who were desperate for those starts. And then we couldn't move in. We literally were in for a month, and then COVID happened. So it was real hairy time. So we went from being totally optimistic, crest of a wave, getting loads of new partners in and loads of new young people on the payroll, and we literally had to, all the outdoor activities and the projects that we plan throughout the year. We do like an outdoor festival series in King's Cross. We do pop-up shops in places like regional places like the Midlands and the South East, and literally every piece of our program was cancelled. We do a lot of outdoor group events kind of work throughout the summer and the spring, and slowly everything was getting cancelled. Funders were trying to withdraw, and deposits were paid out. And when you work with other small companies in the music industry and in the media industry, what you don't want to do, they're under the same pressure. So the last thing we wanted to do was recall those deposits. So there was a lot of outlay and not very much coming in for a while, but I'm sure that everybody can tell you a similar situation. Do you want to hear about what's happened?
Just first of all, just tell me about a couple of projects, or what you think was one of the most impactful projects you did last year, just as an example of the work that you were doing.
We did Upshoots, which is a series of lunchtime shows in King's Cross, and it's completely programmed by our young people. They choose all of the unsigned emerging artists that take part in it, and they perform live for lunchtime audiences throughout the summer. And in that area, there's companies like Google, Island, Virgin, Camden Council's there, the whole PRS, Basca's there. So it's a great opportunity for them. And we did that last year. And then because they did such a good job of it, they do all the promotion, the marketing, the budgeting, the fundraising for it, everything. Because they did such a good job, it was commissioned this summer. So actually someone else was going to pay for them to do it this summer. And so, we had that thing where you think, oh, great, we don't have to hire kit. We can actually buy it. I've got a new office to put it in now, and we can make some savings. And of course, we made the outlay, and then everything got cancelled for this summer. So that was one of the biggest impactful things that we did. But we work on loads of projects for like the Arts Council and for Performing Rights Society Foundation. And again, it was really difficult to complete those things. We'd also funded artists such as Hamza and the composers and Berwin, who recently got signed to Columbia. And again, they couldn't complete their projects because their projects were all to do with like for example, Frisco from Boy But No. We helped him get funding for a tour, and Berwin was going to get funding to do some live shows. And again, no one could finish their projects or fulfill their their conditions to get the extra funding. So they'd done everything up to that stage and couldn't actually deliver at the last minute. So I'm sure it's the same as everybody, but hand to mouth, like a bit of a charity, like the charity that we are, it was quite an investment, and we felt like we were on cloud nine, being able to actually afford to buy things and have an office rather than just paying ongoing rent and ongoing hire for these things, just for everything to cancel at that moment. So yeah, we were on a crest of a wave last year. This year it's been a struggle, but we've clawed it back. I don't know if you guys want to talk about what happened previous, and then I can talk about what happened afterwards later.
No. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's just go around quickly and just hear again from everyone else, just about what people were focused on in 2019, what they were thinking they were going to get involved with, and then we'll talk about those impacts in all of your specific areas. Francine, let's just hear from you next, just of what KeyChange had sort of achieved last year, and what was on the that first January, what was on the meeting agenda for the rest of the year.
So last year in 2019, in September, we launched the second phase of KeyChange. So we had a big event at Reeperbahn Festival. We had our new ambassadors, Kate Nash and Peaches, there to talk about the importance of the project and what was going to happen in the future. The second phase of the project meant that we'd secured some funding to extend the project and to make it bigger. And so a lot of the latter part of 2019 was us planning the talent development program for 2020, and where we would be putting various opportunities together to transport these 74 women and gender minorities to various different festivals, showcasing opportunities, just making the most of this fantastic network of partner festivals, events and organizations that we have. So we managed to get the first one of these meetings done in Stockholm in February, where we got the whole KeyChange network together. And that's the last time we all saw each other IRL. So it's certainly disrupted the plans, because there's an awful lot of travel and movement involved for the musicians and the artists and innovators that are involved in the project. But we have been very fortunate in that we've received funding from Creative Europe, and they're being very flexible and very helpful in assisting us in extending the project and making sure that everyone that's involved is going to be able to access the opportunities that they were promised when they applied to be part of the program. It might be slightly different, it might be at a different time, but we should be able to fulfill our commitments to everybody. So
okay, great. Paul.
Okay, so 2019 was a really good year for us. We've been, kind of increasing our influence and reach as a charity for a while, and in 2019 we did a lot more international work we'd done before. A colleague of mine went to Australia, two of my colleagues did some work in Japan, a colleague did some work in Russia. Just before lockdown I was doing some training for the government of Gibraltar, and we'd been doing a lot of work because there's not really internationally that many organizations that work around access and live music. We'd really started to kind of do work in that field. 2020, what we're really looking forward to is our 20th anniversary. The aim was for 2020 to be one big 20th anniversary celebration, and us to do a lot of work with celebrating and the work we've done with festivals like Glastonbury and the Press Republic festivals, all the venues we work with. We were going to have a big event in May to kind of a celebration party, a year of kind of events, and also within that, whilst obviously a big thing within something like this for a small charity is the fundraising aspects, that we'd worked out some kind of partnerships and some fundraising initiatives tied into that, which obviously would have put us in a really good financial position going forward. Obviously all that kind of fell by the wayside in March. I mean, the one positive I suppose that we've got is that a 21st birthday still sounds like a sort of a thing worth celebrating, so we can move some of that to next year. But certainly, we'll talk about it more later, but certainly without doubt what's happened over the last few months has really set us back in terms of the work we're doing around training and consultancy, and with the with our links with venues and festivals, because there's so much has sort of changed in the industry.
Right. And Sital, so presumably, if you were writing a book, is that sort of publication date shifted now, or is that something that you were?
So I'm a contributor to it, and it's Tamsin Embleton, the founder of the Music Industry Therapists and Coaches. That's she's taking the lead on that, and I think that will be out next year. So I think we can still keep writing and contributing to that. And that was very funded by Live Nation, so that's still coming out next year. But in terms of the stuff that I was doing, with MusicaTherapy, this year was was all about raising awareness for mental health in the music industry, particularly for those musicians of colour, but also to fundraise as well and use the live industry as a way to do so. So I had a series of events planned for this year that were basically going to be sort of in conversations with artists. I have my artists lined up, ready to perform and also talk about their experiences of emotional, mental health and well-being, and fundraise to therefore subsidize therapy costs within the communities, and have delivery of therapy for free, if not or very, very low cost. And on twofold, so that's not happened, so the funding's not there, but then equally the referrals have gotten skyrocketed because people are really struggling at the moment, given the social climate in so many different ways. So there's what started off as like quite a bit of an imbalance has become even more so now. So it's definitely taken a turn. That's
right.
For sure.
Well, I'll probably come back to you next on the next set of questions. But Jacob, the same thing for you. Just about what were you working on last year? What was the biggest impact, and what were your plans at the start of the year?
Oh, last year feels so long away. It's weird. It feels like before the war, actually. Well, last year everything was great. Everything was fine. We were ramping up our big rollout this summer. We were at Reeperbahn Festival, Future Playground, where we were launching the Everywhere Hydrogen project with our partners. Then later in the year, we launched our Circular Festival project at Amsterdam Dance Event with We Love Green Paris, Duor Belgium, Pohoda Slovenia, and Boom Portugal. So everybody was very enthusiastic about the next summer. And then everything went down the drain, actually. So I don't know what to add to that. If you would ask me how the last year was, it was great. We were looking forward to the best year ahead, and then everything changed.
Well, I mean, again, I think it's important to look back on some of this, because obviously, as when we all pray live music comes back, the hope is that we can maybe step into where we were and continue as well. I mean, Sital, I just wanted to come back to you first of all here. I mean, you mentioned that you already had a lot of projects on the go for musicians of colour. I mean, how has COVID impacted here, but also some of the wider things? I mean, we were just discussing in the green room before about Black Lives Matter as well and so on, but how much has that impacted your work and who you work with?
I mean, it massively so. So I suppose, the idea of COVID and everyone being in sort of social isolation has, people have lost their coping mechanisms. People have lost their social connections. People have lost their support systems. And so any sort of underlying mental health issues that might have been at bay before, pre-pandemic, have risen to the surface. That, alongside the additional sort of pressures of being in lockdown, it really sort of compounds difficulties, and people need that support. Then alongside that, the social climate at the moment, there is a lot of trauma coming out and being processed, and it's very, very raw. It's very, very present, and it's highly, highly emotional, traumatic experiences that we're working with at the moment. So yeah, there's definitely a lot going on.
And how challenging has it been from your perspective to actually react to that? And I mean, obviously with home working and lots of other things as well in that context. But how challenging has it been to react to that sort of sudden, explosion, I suppose?
It's been quite challenging. I'm not going to lie. Just kind of getting used to not being in person with clients and feeling. I feel, you lose that intuition and that connectivity. So trying to connect and relate to someone over Zoom, it's that in itself poses so many challenges within the therapeutic world. But then, the idea that even if I were to do work every hour of the day, it just wouldn't be enough. There's just not enough time to support the amount of people who need the support. There's not enough resources. And so it feels like a sinkhole, actually.
This may not be helping this panel then, another online conference call, but Natalie, I mean, is that something that you found as well? I mean, clearly you've got. I mean, I don't know how many young people are. Oh, can I hear you?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that now. What, you've totally depressed me. Like just hearing the panel, I'm just like, oh my god. But just hear it, but like Paul just made me totally forget last year. Like this was supposed to be our 10-year anniversary celebration, and well, like I actually did, I had to forget it. And Jacob the same. It seems like you said before the war. It seems like we've been through it. So I do totally understand. But sorry, Adam, what did you want to ask?
The impact on COVID of the young people that you're working with. I mean, how many young people typically were in your? I know you've got 2 offices now, and you're multiplying. But how many people are in the office now?
Well, at the time it all happened, we'd had a bit of a drive. So in total, I was probably responsible for about 20 people in our core group and in our extended group. COVID was very difficult for them. You've got to remember, I can see everybody around sitting at home, having their meetings and having their Zooms, because we're lucky enough to have a kitchen or a living room that isn't full of other people and is calm and is a safe space to work, and that isn't what it's like for a lot of young people. It can be chaotic. I've got kids that share in bedrooms with 2 and 3 other siblings, and still trying to get things done and be professional. Some of if you come typically from a low income household, it's things like you might have a parent with dependency issues. You might be a carer. And if they are suffering during COVID, then trust me, you are going to suffer if you're living with them and if you're their child, So there was lots of different issues coming on. Anxiety, as I mentioned before, like a high percentage of our young people, almost 80%, are from Black families, and everybody knew someone or had someone close to them that was suffering or hospitalized or on a ventilator. 2 of my Black staff had COVID. And one of them particularly had a young child that she's responsible for by herself. So it was very much just trying to get them through that, keep them routines, keeping them having something stable and current in their lives for the longest time. They couldn't wait to get back to the office, and that's why I'm here now, and they're all here too. They couldn't wait to get back. I know other people have been hesitant or reticent, and other offices have been closed, but Small Green Shoots is a safe space. It is a professional space for them to work. They are supported here, and it's also a part of their social and motivational connection, and that's really, really important to them. And that is something that's really worrying me about the state of the industry now. People aren't going back to work, and for me, we've done so much work on diversity and things like unconscious bias and all this training. We need to be back in the office, really, because otherwise it's just wasted, as far as I'm concerned. It's controversial, but that's just the way I see it.
Yeah. I mean, again,
Black Lives Matter really affected the shoots. They were so unmotivated. I've been doing this for years, for over a decade, and the reactions that we had, I mean, I'll show you guys, go on our Instagram, look at the video diaries. They felt completely hopeless. They were saying to me, Nat, why are you even got us doing this? Because we're not going to succeed. We're not going to get through it. The minute we leave here, we're on our own. Who's going to hire us? How are we going to get ahead? There's going to be these ceilings in front of us, these barriers in front of us. So why are you training us for a sector that clearly doesn't really want us to succeed? And that was really, really hard for me to face. That was so awful. We don't work in a place that's from negativity or we try and push away self-doubt. But there was a lot of questions there that I could not answer. There was a lot of reassurances that I could not give them. And COVID on top of that has compounded it. It really, really has. These kids are totally out there, totally isolated. They don't have the connections that a lot of us on this screen have. And to know that even when you do have connections, it's still not enough for you to succeed through the ranks, for you to work in certain areas of the industry. It was demoralizing, it was paralyzing to a lot of them. And only just now, being back in the office, this is why it was so important for us to get back together. Only just now are they starting to get themselves remotivated, refocused, and start believing that a career for low-income Black kids is actually possible. And without the support of everybody coming back to work, I don't know how long I'm going to let them believe that. That's how detrimental and how critical this year was for young people. Okay.
And I mean, again, I know obviously a little bit about your work, and obviously Small Green Shoots does loads of different kinds of work. But one of the key things is taking kids from low income backgrounds and preparing them for work. I mean, how I suppose psychologically and practically, how difficult is that when A, the industry is in shutdown, but B, we don't know whether a lot of jobs are going to be available. And C, there's so much uncertainty about the future, and obviously you're going to have, next year you'll have another bunch of young people wanting to come in, and there's that sort of logjam effect, trying to get on board.
Psychologically, this year's been like a sledgehammer. I've never known anything like it. I've never had to look at my young charges and say, no, it's shit. I don't know if it's going to work out for you. That for me, it was psychologically damaging. I think I spent 2 days in bed, and anyone who knows me knows that just doesn't happen, because I don't have 2 days for anything. So it was a sledgehammer. Now I've got the next issue, which is, you're right, I don't want to become a holding house. Like these kids, they're, like half of our charges this year, they're ready to go. They're trained. They're chomping at the bit to get into work, and there isn't anything out there, because the last stage of what we do at Small Green Shoots is secondments. It's getting them to go and work in businesses. It's getting them to actually get that real work experience, to put everything they've learned here into practice and get that real life experience, build their network, meet people, show them what they've got, and learn how this department works with that department in front of them. And at the moment, they just can't do that. I don't have the opportunities for them to do that because no one's back. And they need that to learn. They need to, they get the training here, but to learn those skills and to make those networks, they need to be there physically to see the real work happening and to meet these real life people. So this is a real challenge for us. And I don't want to become a holding house for young people. We just to give you an idea, we decided to buck the trend and recruit young people. So we made 3, opportunities available, and we had to stop advertising them after 10 days because of the influx of CVs and applications. I mean, we had kids walking from miles because they didn't have the bus fare to get here. Like, there's a time bomb going on. Do you know what I mean? And we really need to get back to work if we're going to help these kids get through, because without being there physically, they can't learn, they can't train, and diversity is just going to take another hit, I'm afraid.
Okay, look, I'll come to Paul now quickly. Paul, could you give us a little insight into? I mean, again, I know Attitudes Everything works with obviously disabled audiences, but employees and artists as well. But also be interested to hear a bit more, just because it launched this week, about Beyond the Music. So again, again, it's good to see that you're actively, you're launching a new initiative, even in this sort of socially distanced pandemic.
Yeah, so we had the funding for Beyond the Music before the pandemic started, and it's one of these things where when you've got a new volunteer and employment project, the last thing you want to happen just after you were planning to start doing that is a global pandemic. And there's no getting around the fact that this is a tough situation that has really complicated things. But I think it's made what we're doing more important. I mean, it's obviously added a lot of challenges due to the uncertainty around the industry as a whole. But the reality is that disabled people have been hugely affected by what's happened in a number of different ways. So there's firstly the fact that a lot of people who very much object to think of themselves as vulnerable were suddenly sort of told they were vulnerable to this illness, and obviously psychologically that's got a huge impact. And obviously if you are told to shield, or even if you're told you're vulnerable and need to sort of try to avoid society as much as possible, it very much goes against how many disabled people how many disabled people would like to think about themselves, and also means that sort of individual choice around managing risk gets taken away, and you get back to a situation where you're basically being told by people who, kind of consider, by being told by people who present themselves as authority figures what to do, which is not something which is very comfortable for disabled people, and something which disabled people are moving away from. The other concern we've got is that prejudice towards disabled people and discrimination has increased. We've heard of instances of people being abused in the street for example. There seems to be a conception amongst some people that because disabled people are more vulnerable, actually being disabled increases the risk that you're spreading it to other people. And we've heard people being abused in the street for being considered to be potentially sort of spreading the virus. We're also concerned that when things go back, people are not going to want to necessarily employ disabled people due to a belief that disabled people, if there's another pandemic, might need more time off, or this idea that disabled people are vulnerable. And obviously one of the things which research shows that disabled staff members take less time off generally than non-disabled staff members, but it sort of creates this image of vulnerability, which we think could be quite damaging. So we're quite excited by doing the Beyond the Music initiative, partly because it's just quite good to try and get something positive out there. And exactly as Nat was talking about, the lack of hope. We just want to give sort of disabled people looking to get into the industry a sort of sense of positivity and a sense of possibility that maybe there will be a time beyond this where good things can happen. It's not all going to be as it is at the moment, and we think that's really important. And obviously it's going to be challenging. We're one of the things we've done to tackle this is working with a number of venues on an advisory group to make sure that all the work we do and the asks we do around employers are realistic and practical in terms of what's achieved. I mean, I think one of the things that's kind of made it a bit of an easier pill to swallow in some ways is the fact that my thoughts about the project were it's never about getting some more disabled people into work for the next 3 years. For me, it's always been about the long game. It's about trying to skill people up so that in 20 years' time, disabled people are leading the music industry, that there are disabled people in senior positions in the industry. So it may well be that a lot of the work we end up doing is kind of robustness and preparation over the long term and skills over the long term, whereas the opportunities in the short term may be harder to find. At the same time, obviously, my belief is that there will be a point where the music industry does come back from this, and obviously we don't know when that will be, and it's going to be, I don't want to play down the fact that will be tough, but what I want to make sure is that when there is a position where people are being employed again, that any talented disabled person has got the same opportunity as any other talented person to get opportunities in the industry. And I think that's absolutely vital. And I think in a strange way, the fact that the opportunities are going to be less in the next few years means that diversity becomes more important. It can't just be about sort of kind of same opportunities going to a limited number of people when there's even less so than usual opportunities to go around. It's got to be about trying to create circumstances where the best, there's access to the best pool of talent possible, and the best people get those opportunities. And that's got to be about finding ways to diversify things. Obviously, for disabled people, the work I'm doing, but obviously in terms of the work that Nat and everyone else is doing, it's got to be about diversity as a wider thing, not simply about sort of, kind of the interest of one group or another group, but about trying to make the music industry a genuinely diverse place with kind of amazingly talented people getting access to opportunities.
Fine. I mean, I know one of the things with Beyond the Music when you launched as well, I mean, it did flag there is that disparity. I think it's some Arts Council England stats between the number of deaf and disabled people in the music and creative sectors with the general workforce as well. And I think that was something that also flags as well.
It's astonishing. I mean, it's something like, I think this was a 2017 survey that the Arts Council did. And in Arts Council organisations, there were Arts Council England funded organisations, I should say, MPOs. I think 19% of the adult working age population, I don't know why I said adult working age, we don't do child labour in this country, 19% of the working age population are disabled or could consider themselves disabled under the Equality Act. But I think it's 4 people in Arts Council NPO organisations and 1.9% in music industry organisations. So there's a massive disparity there. there. And I think there's two stories there being told. One is the fact that opportunities aren't necessarily there for disabled people. And I think it's not just that. I think it's also that, it's not just that the opportunities aren't there. It's that I think a lot of disabled people come out of an education system thinking there is no way in hell they're going to work in the music industry. So it's not just actually, the challenge I think we've got is it's not just about creating opportunities. It's actually about helping support people to believe those opportunities are possible for them. And I think very much, particularly people who go through non-mainstream education and kind of specialist education with disabled people, often their horizons are very much narrowed, and they end up, I'm being a bit sort of glib here, but people are kind of encouraged to do kind of courses in kind of horticulture or animal husbandry or whatever. Not like I'm knocking those sectors at all, but I think there's a sense that kind of these are jobs that kind of disabled people can do, and there's other jobs disabled people can't do, and I think that's vital. But I think the other thing is that when we did some research around the Next Stage project or artist project a few years ago, we found there was a substantial number of people who were concealing their impairment and sort of, disabled people working, trying to be artists and trying to work as artists. But I think 2/3 of our survey respondents had not told a promoter that they were disabled due to, or they had kind of access requirements due to the potential consequence of that. So that meant that their needs weren't being met and they were potentially jeopardizing their well-being whilst kind of performing. And we don't just want, ultimately it may well be there are people in the music industry at the moment who have impairments, who could be considered disabled under the Equality Act, who may not want to be open about that, who are currently not achieving for that reason. And I mean, and I left, I went to university, but I left university at in my 20s, and then spent the next 10 years basically struggling in organisations where I didn't want to tell anyone I had access requirements. Then generally would end up doing a terrible job as a result, and then sort of basically people thinking that I was hopeless. It was only when I was in my early 30s it suddenly occurred to me I could actually say that I kind of need to have to help me here, and then that's kind of been an eye-opener. And I think there's no way you can ignore the fact that there's so many people who don't think they can ask for things they need and don't feel safe. And it is, again, exactly like Nat was talking about, it's safety. It's feeling like your workplace is a safe space where you can actually ask for things you need. It's so vital, and it's such a big part of our project, I think, is trying to get support in the music industry. And I think the goodwill's there. To be clear, I think the goodwill is there. It's just actually people, need a bit of support, but supporting people to make sure that they present themselves as being as accessible as possible and be in places that want to recruit people. Because, even when we've been running the project so far, we go and talk to people, and kind of large organizations saying, we want to support disabled talent. It's just that, I don't think disabled people actually necessarily know that. And I don't think even necessarily the disabled people in those organizations know that. Then they don't ask for what they need, and then end up in a situation where they're not being supported. They're not being supported. It's not doing their jobs very well. Because they're not doing a job very well and not applying for jobs very well, then people think, well, actually disabled people aren't as capable as they might be. And then you get this knock-on effect where there's a lack of representation of disabled people when talking anywhere, because disabled people haven't got those jobs or excelled in those jobs. You then never see disabled people in high-profile jobs, and then because of that, people think, well, actually, that job isn't open to me. And I think this is a kind of damaging kind of knock-on thing, which we're trying to. So for me, obviously, COVID makes it challenging in terms of immediate challenges, but I think it makes it more important to try and actually just break the cycle. It shouldn't just be about kind of doing some nice things to diversify the industry for 2-3 years. It's about in 20 years' time, let's make sure that the music industry has really diverse leadership, not just it's not the short term. I think it's got to be out the long term.
Sure. I mean, again, it was great to see that UK Music Diversity Task Force, that attitudes, everything's now part of that, and that voice is going to be included in that whole conversation. I guess that's pretty important as well going forward. Francine and Jacob, I mean, I'll sort of tackle you both at once here, but clearly your main partnerships are festivals, artists, obviously live music shut down. So, I mean, in terms of those constituents that you're working with, what's been the impact, and what kind of work can you have been doing over the last, those sort of 4 or 5 months?
So I mean, with the KeyChange pledge, we're asking festivals and music organizations to sign up to sort of better the gender representation within their setups. And to do that, we've got quite a structured pledge system in place, which has a start and a finish, and it's got certain kind of number targets so that people can measure how close to their pledges they're getting and whether they're achieving them or not. We've got about 150 festivals signed up to that pledge. And of course, with the live industry shutting down in late March, and most festivals taking place in the summer, a huge number of those events haven't been able to take place. So we have just had to have conversations with everybody and just say, you know, obviously this isn't going to affect your commitment to this project or anything like that. If we can gather our network of 350 almost music organizations together to, you know, to share some best practices and to try and get some things moving, some conversations going that's going to be beneficial for everybody, then that can be our position in this conversation, and that's something that we can do to help. But yeah, obviously everybody's been hugely affected. And I just really appreciate some of the points that Paul was making there, because at the moment, we're having this big discussion about building back better and what we want the industry to look like on the other side. And obviously representation is a massive, massive part of that conversation. So yeah, we're talking now about how the music industry as a whole needs to have much better protections, which is why it's such great news that we've got these task forces that are coming together to look after the industry's interests. But yeah, representation just needs to be a massive part of that entire conversation, making sure that, you know, there's all kinds of voices, and that those voices will be sustained in the industry at every single level, not just newcomers, but board members. Absolutely every influencer decision maker in the industry needs to have all voices represented.
Jacob, let's hear from you on this as well.
Could you please leave the where I can see all of you, because I'm craving for some nonverbal feedback. It's so exhausting looking at my same face. It's weird, and if we can stay like that, it would be great. Well, the last, I would say, roughly 5 months were crazy, and like Sital put it, I mean, it was a trauma. I mean, we could feel ourselves being traumatized. And Natalie, when you talked about the sledgehammer, this was exactly the feeling. I felt like being in a car crash in slow motion. Like everybody saw what was coming at the very same time. We still had the idea, okay, maybe late summer it will change, then maybe late autumn. And when everything started in March, we still were planning for the summer, and it felt weirder and weirder and weirder with every meeting I was attending, because everybody at some point was aware that that situation will get worse and worse and worse. And so, to be honest, what felt like a very personal stress test in the beginning, like I don't know how you were doing during lockdown, but it was crazy for us. Like we in Germany, we had a very easy lockdown, but I have partners in Italy and Spain, and they weren't allowed to leave their apartments for 6 weeks. And I saw these people really going crazy. So we had these first conferences where everybody was going, yeah, we can do it, we can work it out. Now we're getting digital, it's going to be nice, and this is like the move we needed. And from every meeting, they were getting more like edgy and edgy and edgy. So it started as a personal stress test. Then it became a business stress test, because everybody was realizing that whatever they planned over the summer, whatever income they planned for, whatever activity they planned for, was just dissolving into thin air. And so we were traumatized, and the biggest effort we took into not dissociating with the trauma itself, because this is what you do when you're traumatized. You at some point, to stay sane, you have to cut off your senses, because otherwise your system will go break. And so this, we put so much effort in at the very same time staying conscious and being able to be a witness to the craziness evolving around us. And we had to deal with so many uncertainties over these times that it really felt weird. And I don't know how it was for you, but I was surrounded by people challenging the virus, challenging the lockdown, challenging science, asking, do we need that? Isn't it a big scope? Fuck up whatever Gates is having on their minds. And this took so much energy, because even good friends approached me, sending me long videos and asking, what do you think about that? And and then I had to watch another 30-minute video of a madman telling a weird story, and it was so exhausting. And at some point, I was reminded of Hunter S. Thompson, because he said, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. And like, everybody is super weird now. And like Francine, when you said building back better, I would love to have it built back better. But right now, I have the feeling that we are still in the ex-novation phase. Because we talk so much about innovation that we tend to forget we need ex-novation. And ex-novation basically is getting rid of everything unused anymore. And this is such a painful process. So to be honest, I saw people in my network, myself included, going through all the phases of grief and loss. So in the first, we are very active, then getting really angry, then getting really sad, and then beginning to be able to cope with the situation, dealing with uncertainty, creating tolerance for ambiguity, and saying, I don't know what the future is going to be like. And this for me is the hardest thing, because this is my business. I get paid to tell people about possible futures, and I'm very good at that. And for the very first time, I have to say, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think IQ will cover the conspiracy theorist panel maybe in the future or something.
Please don't.
Quite a long one, possibly. I mean, it's funny actually just even talking about, about things about lockdown. I mean, lockdown seems like years ago here or something. Obviously, it was only a few months ago, and then obviously, furlough, all the uncertainty now as well, and obviously home working as well. I mean, in terms of the here and now. I mean, how? I'll throw this question out to everyone, I guess. But how sort of engaged are you with with people in the music business now, or people in the live sector? I mean, again, clearly it's a extremely traumatic time in the sector, and people are fearful for their jobs, fearful for the future. But are people still quite engaged with what you're doing and your work?
Yeah.
Well, I can say that personally, I think just as we were saying in the pre-chat before this panel, that actually for the first time there's been this glimmer of hope that actually live events but online are still trying to kind of channel their influence and their effect for sort of different campaigns. So there's one event coming up towards the end of the year, which is a online festival, but the proceeds of their vinyl records, the compilation records, will go towards funding therapy sessions for musicians of color. So that's going to be great to see that funneling back in. That actually there is still an awareness that whilst the live industry is suffering, actually it supports so many other sectors as well, and that can't be kind of ignored or put down the priorities just because we have to funnel into the industry itself as well.
Does anyone else want to pick up on that? And again, whether there's any sort of disconnect with the industry at the moment, or whether you're still hearing from people and they're still engaged with what you're doing?
I think.
I would say with the industry, the disconnect that we've got is that, they're great. We've got loads of Black Lives Matter. We've got loads of people that seem to want to help, and loads of people that I'm sounding really cynical when I put the scene in there. I'm sorry. But, we've got lots of people that are helping and offering help. But, we don't want it to be Black Lives Matter for Christmas. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we want it to be like a long-term thing. And, we're looking at more. Listen, I'm not one of those, I'm going to turn away money ethically type of people. I see people that need to eat around me every day. But I much prefer a partnership, a long-term partnership. I'm not here for your press release. I can do your press release as long as you're going to give me a partner, but a partnership. But it's got to be something that's a bit authentic. So there's a rush of conversations happening, but the proof is in the pudding, don't you think, guys? Like, let's just see listen, I'm a trendy person, jeans were in a minute ago and now they're not. And I don't want Black Lives Matter to be a skinny jeans thing, The difficulty that I've got is with COVID compounding it. I think it's very difficult to have meaningful opportunities for a lot of people, because there is so many little opportunities for people that exist. But looking forward, I'm concerned that, again, it's going to be, okay, even if digital opportunities arrive, and please, Sital, I really would love to hear from you on this, and Jacob as well. Even if digital opportunities arrive, yeah, look at you guys. Look, you're in rooms of your own with no one else in them, right? So you can be professional. You can do your job. You can actually hear me. We can have a conversation. You know, it all makes sense. But if you don't have that, if you don't come from the household that has a spare room, you've just lost that whole opportunity right there, you know, let alone not being the right kind of fit for an organization, or not having that natural sense of confidence, resilience, or entitlement, you know. So now they're even more insecure way. Like, let's think about it. The people that are going to succeed in this life right now, this kind of music sector digital world that we're living in, the people that are going to succeed are the people that have houses with a spare room, yeah? Places where they can work, places where they don't have loads of kids running around, they don't have codependents, they're not overcrowded, and they can work regular hours. Also, you've got to think about it. These people that are going to get these opportunities, they're going to have to sell themselves on Zoom. They're going to have to be used to this. Okay, maybe we can get around that, but they've got to have an internet connection first. And I don't know about you guys, but 4 of our kids got cut off during COVID. They had parents on 0 hours contracts, and after month 2, the utilities were getting cut. And I'm running around the place with dongles because I didn't want to get an Uber because I was freaked out. So I literally was running around the place with dongles, trying to make sure that they had a Wi-Fi connection, you know. 20 of our staff, 8 of them had laptops they could take home. Another collection that we had to do. If you don't have that stuff, how are you going to get yourself in, let alone ahead? So I'm just going to leave that with you guys here about, you know, the Black Lives Matter was one thing. The second sledgehammer, that was the car crash that Jacob was talking about, watching it all unfold in slow motion and almost not believing it. The real sledgehammer, the real wrecking ball is what's happening now.
I think Nat talks about something really important, which is one of the problems is that we can talk about how great it will be if things move past kind of improve on narrower inequalities. But the reality is the last few months have widened those inequalities. So actually the first part is going to be undoing that, and then we can start to look at how we can make things better. But I think actually getting to an equilibrium where we were before, which was unequal in itself, is actually going to be a lot of work in itself. But I mean, we're working with about 35 grassroots venues and quite a few authorities and new build venues and things, and we're still having conversations with people. Music industry is still active, and I think that's all positive. I think where the problem comes for us is that at the moment, obviously, people are limited in their ability to act, and I don't mean that as a criticism of anyone. The reality is no one knows when live music's going to restart. No one knows where we're going to be with jobs and employment in a year's time. And ultimately, we're having a lot of good conversation with people who want to do good things. But the reality is that people's ability to act during uncertainty is somewhat limited. So, and ultimately, good intentions are appreciated, but only ever get things so far. And there comes a point where that needs to translate into action. If you've got a situation where people can't act, that obviously means that, it's basically just hoping the good intentions last until there's a point where someone can actually put those into action. But that's far from guaranteed. And, and that's absolutely right. With all these things, it can't be about some short-term thing. It can't be about kind of some, it's like when the lockdown started, people talked about this wonderful world that was going to emerge and all these kind of this more equal, better thing coming out of it. And I think things are quite quickly kind of settled into a slightly kind of rubbisher version of the previous groove at the moment. And I think trying to get towards things being better is a huge step at the moment.
Yeah, and I think also another thing is that the funding, lots of the money isn't there anymore, and a lot of it is being short-sighted. The idea of kind of tick box exercises and throwing sort of COVID relief support funds, which definitely are needed, but it's kind of like, here, have all of our money now and I know Help Musicians UK and PRS and Spotify, their massive reserves were gone within like days. And so it just led me to think, well, how is that going to be recouped, and how is that going to be distributed to the sectors that you were distributing to before this? Because the uncertainty of the pandemic meant that no one knew when this was going to end, or that it was only going to be for a few months, so let's pump in some money now to keep people afloat. But actually, there's just no long-term plans in place at the moment, and long-term partnerships and long-term ways to kind of slowly build back up, rather than kind of have this big injection and then suddenly kind of think, it's run out, and now we still have no money.
I mean, I think that's one of the key things just around this discussion in general, is obviously, the live industry at the moment is in survival mode. It's by definition, it's got to be short-termist, where obviously everything that you guys are doing is, it's about long-term, it's about change, long-term investment in your, individual sectors. Again, no one here, I imagine, was, thinking that change is going to happen overnight. But, doing it in an industry which is so financially challenged, and when it comes back, it's also going to have an imperative to make money by any means necessarily very, very quickly. And what that's going to do, what's that going to do? I mean, again, I imagine that must be some concern for all of you.
I think there's a massive risk that diversity can be seen as a nice thing when you can afford to do it. Yeah. And I think that's the major concern I've got, is that, when people run out of money, there's potentially the risk that then think, well, actually, we don't still need to make the adjustments for disabled customers. We don't still need to kind of diversify our workforce. And I think it's why it's so important to try and make it make diversity a central thing to a kind of vibrant industry rather than a lovely add-on,
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's something that we've been trying to do during this quieter time as well, is just to make sure that this conversation doesn't go silent during this time, and that when we are rebuilding as much as we can. And now that we've got some of the live industry getting in touch with us with these good intentions for what they'd like to do when the industry is back in action, that we're getting them to really firm that up and make, structured action plans so that these things are able to happen, and that diversity is going to be a prominent conversation all the way through this.
Can I ask you something, all of you, because I hear that back in action term coming back and again and again. From my point of view, there is an elephant in the room, and to be honest, parts of the industry we are engaged with are going to die. Big parts. I'm not able to look into the future, but some say it's going to be a third, others say a half, 50% of it. And at what point in the future are we going to really look at the effects of that? It's brutal, but to be honest, most of the bigger actors we are working with are quite uncertain about the future, to put it in the most positive light possible right now. And not being certain about the future in their case means they are looking at a business reduction 50, 60, 70%. And this is brutal. It's going to be brutal.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that, some of that's probably not peculiar to music. And, again, uncertainty is everywhere at the moment, isn't it? In terms of what any part of our lives, culture, economy is going to be. I mean, it's sort of the great unknown at the moment. I mean, we're probably at our hour now. So obviously, if anyone wants to throw in some questions from the chat room, please feel free. Not saying we want to sort of finish on a positive note, because I don't think necessarily it's a time that everyone's feeling massively optimistic at the moment. But in terms of, I mean, this idea of obviously where the industry in a way is almost being broken down to be hopefully rebuilt again. If there was going to be one change when that happens, what would each of you like to see? Don't all rush at once.
I'd just like to see different voices. Sorry, I just want to make sure that we've got different voices in the room at every single level of whatever's rebuilt on the other side. I think that's the vital thing from my perspective.
Yeah, I think for me it would be kind of just reducing stigma to talk about issues that people are having. This was, for me personally, the idea of mental health being a normal part of conversation, as normal as saying, "Oh God, I've got a bit of a headache or a bit of a stomachache at work." I think that is something that I really love to see on the other side. I think that will save a hell of a lot of lives, actually, to put it bluntly.
I think I'd say that given that the opportunities over the coming years are more limited, access to those opportunities has to be fair, and it's vital that people see the value of having a wide range of different people in the room. So I'm echoing what Francine said to a large degree. I do think that's it, as many voices in the room as possible, and people seeing the value of that and seeing that as a positive, seeing that as essential, not just an add-on.
I think for me and Jacob, I've sort of said the shoots love you here. They keep saying, "Oh, we really like that guy," and pointing when I'm in the background. But I think for me it's really simple. The shoots came up with this project they want to do, and it's about 2020, and it's about them calling 2020 the year of vision. It's the year when the blinkers came off. It's the year when the gloves came off and things got ugly and you just saw things, for the first time. And I've got goosebumps here because there's things I didn't want them to see, if I'm honest with you. Do you know what I mean? There's things I didn't want to see. But the blinkers, we realised we were vulnerable. We realised that we were scared. We realised there was stuff that was out of our control. We realised that some people are racist. We realised that some buildings are racist. We realised that people with low incomes have less options. They have less opportunity, and they have to work that much harder. But we've seen it now. So I think the one thing I want to see for next year is, okay, we saw it. Now we act on it. All I want is for people to say yes. That's what I want to see for next year. It's so easy in this industry. It's so easy to say no because that it's less work and whatever. I just want to have more of those yes people. And I think there's some in this group now, people that will just take a chance and say, yes, okay, let's try it. Yes, okay, let me see if I can help you. Do you know what? I don't know if it's going to work, but yes, we'll get behind it. That's what I want to see for next year.
Yeah. I'd like to add something to the thing I said before. Even if I wanted to point out the elephant in the room, I'm still very optimistic. I'm super optimistic about the future of the industry. And the main reason for that is at the very same time that parts of the industries are going to die, the people behind these formats and these productions are not going to die. And if I look into the future, the demand for cultural production will be even bigger. The demand for festivals, the demand for music, for cinema, for arts in general will even be bigger than as it is today. So if the thing we're talking about is a marketable product, the demand will be there. We have to find new formats. And if any industry in the world is able to come up with new innovative formats, it is the creative industries. But to be honest, on the way to get there, we have to somehow make our hands dirty because it's not going to be easy. We can't just pretend that we can ramp up our business next summer and pretend nothing has happened, like real traumatized people do, like nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. No, it hasn't. It's not there. It's not there. So if we are able to build an industry based on the demand of the people, based on the dreams of the people, based on the new people, of the younger workforce really streaming into the market and coming up with the ideas, then there's a bright future for the industry. But we have to make our hands dirty. We have to be really transparent. We have to be really honest. And from my point of view, the biggest challenge with the industry over the year was it exploded exponentially up to a size which didn't do well on nobody. It didn't do well on the promoters. It didn't do well on the people working in the industry. It didn't even do well on the audience of these big events. Because if you ask somebody at a big event, how big you want that event to be, nobody says, I want to have 100,000 event. Maybe we will just condense all these big things into more of smaller, of nicer events. And this I see being a very possible, desirable future. So in that case, I'm a very stoic optimist. Stoic in the way that I look at it and I try not to get crazy. I'm not trying to be too traumatized. I'm trying to still stay sane and conscious and work with my trauma. And at the very same time, I'm optimistic because people like us, we can't live without culture. It's impossible. And this is reality. So the demand is there. We just have to find new ways of coming up with better ideas for the future. So in that regard, the future will be very circular. It will be very about solidarity. It will be fair. It will be human. And so will festivals be. There's no other way around. We can't rebuild the old world of festivals. It's gone. It has died.
Okay. Well, look, stoic optimism. I think that's probably good thing to cling on to, probably.
It helps.
I think we're up to our time. It sort of feels in some ways we've only sort of paddled in the shadows on some of these things. So in the shallows, sorry. So maybe there's something to come back here on another time. But I just want to say thank you again, everybody, for taking part in the panel. So thanks, Francine. Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Natalie. Paul, Sital. Thanks to IQ for hosting the discussion. And I believe there'll be a report written up tomorrow online, and the video will be hosted forevermore. So yeah, thanks very much for taking part, and see everybody soon.